morning, guys. Good morning. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday, everybody. Today is the 29th. It's a leap year, man. Leap year. And we're bringing Dr. Serge, so he'll come on in a few moments, but it's actually a very special day for many reasons. This happens once every 4 years. Wow. So I didn't realize that till a few seconds ago. That's actually the 29th. So that's a wonderful thing. Just because, I mean, how often do you see the 229, right? Every 4 years. That being said, it's a beautiful day ahead. It's a Q&A for our schedule. We have a wonderful medical student on board that he'll be coming on in a few moments. Just want to wait to see who else jumps on. Typically, the mornings, everyone jumps on, but either they're getting ready, having a cup of coffee and whatnot. So we love the Q&As just because we have an opportunity to have a voice, opportunity to ask questions, because one student's question could be everyone else's question, and then my answer can help them all, help everybody out, right? In the afternoon, we're doing neuro today, like our usual schedule. So looking forward to bringing on Dr. Sergio in a few moments. Just going to wait another minute or two to see who else jumps on as well. And please, once we have Dr. Sergio discuss and share his wisdom about step 1, step 2, and BMEs, then by all means, you could ask him, honestly, any questions you guys have and like, because hearing it from me is one thing. I know it works, but having a fellow colleague, a fellow student, fellow friend that has been in these seats, in these digital seats at one point, it's refreshing. I mean, I wish I had that as a medical student. I had my seniors in school provide advice, but I didn't know if the advice was right or wrong, right? I wasn't sure if what they did was right. I wasn't sure if what they did well in, like the scores. So we just took advice and went with it. Now it's more like, wow, you actually can physically meet somebody who was doing what you're doing now and is successful, right? So, all right. So I'm going to bring on Dr. Sergio. I'm going to introduce him and then ask him a bunch of questions. And then from there at the end, please, any questions you have for Dr. Sergio, I know he'll be happy to answer, okay? So Dr. Sergio is a fourth-year medical student at St. George University. He's currently doing medical rotations in Florida. I wish I was in Florida, but I'm up in Chicago's beautiful, but it's warmer in Florida. He recently took his step 2, and now he's been with me since step 1, and he took step 1 in October 22nd of last year. He took step 2 just recently. So now, I mean, he's in rotations, and he's on board to tell you a little more about his experience in step 1 and BMEs, his clinical rotations, and everything. So Dr. Sergio, I love the fan in the background, man. Thank you for coming on board. How you doing this morning? Good? Doing
Hey,
well?
Doc, how you doing? Thank you for having me. How are
My
you?
pleasure. How does it feel to have a little time to relax between rotations?
Oh man, it's amazing. Yeah, the grind for step, I know what you guys are feeling now. It's the worst, but once it's done, it's very alleviating. So
It's alleviating. It feels
yeah,
good, right?
feels
Awesome,
good.
awesome, awesome. Wonderful, man. Wonderful. So, I mean, so tell us how it was before we met, meaning, when you were trying to study for step 1, how did you feel? What challenges did you encounter? How was it overall prior to us meeting to prep for step 1?
So you touched on a good point about your, colleagues giving you advice and stuff. A lot of times that doesn't really work. And that was like the problem I had, right? I didn't want to get a tutor. I was like, oh, I can do this. It's pass fail now, blah, blah, blah. 6 months later, my MBMEs were at like 56%. So I'm like, I'm doing something wrong. Now I need help. So I reached out to Stavros and we started working then. And just like the test taking skills, like question learning, I was doing all backwards, like from what he was pretty much teaching. Content wise, I
So,
had a lot
Sergio,
of gaps. Yeah,
what were you doing? So I want to ask you, what were you doing prior then? What resources were you using? What were
so
you doing to
I
get you
was
to that
basically
level 50?
doing I was doing questions like all mixed and like not really doing content. It was just mainly like questions. And I thought that I would build on the content gaps by just doing these questions, but the way I was doing everything and the way I was approaching questions was completely different than what Stavros taught me. So um yeah, like, I had to go back to the basics. So, the big three that he's preaching now, it's very, very important because like 90% of step one is literally biochem, immuno, micro, things like that. So you really have to like hone down on those to really improve. And I wasn't really focusing on that. I was just kind of all over the place. And again, like I was doing everything mixed. So when I started with Stavros, he wanted to do everything, more compartmentalized, and everything you hear from everybody else is going to tell you like, no, that's the worst thing. You got to do everything mixed because the exam's mixed and blah blah. It's like, well, you got to have a learning phase, and then you got to have, the testing phase, and then when you get to that point, that's when you kind of want to mix everything in. So yeah, before Stavros, that's what I was doing. Just a bunch of mixed questions and not learning anything.
I
Yeah.
mean, it was frustrating because you did mention NBMEs at 50-55, right? If you
Yeah.
don't mind, a few moments, can you, because I know a lot of questions will be asked, if not now, later. NBMEs are challenging naturally or themselves. What struggles did you have facing NBMEs, and how did you overcome them?
So at the beginning, yeah, like I said, it was like I didn't really have a grasp on anything. So when I would start an NBME, it was like all new material all over again to me. So there was no confidence in answering the questions. There was no like the test taking skill wasn't really like there. So navigating through an NBME felt completely different at that time. I couldn't like really reason even a question out. So I noticed that it was also part in test taking strategy. So I had to that the only thing that changed was literally implementing everything you gave me because at that point I was doing everything that I thought I had to do and it clearly wasn't working because my scores were literally repeatedly 56, 55. I couldn't break over that like 61, I think it was to pass or something like that. So
Yeah,
yeah, it was just not working.
it's aggravating. The way the questions are written and structured in your NBME, is that how it is on the actual step exam?
So it's funny because I feel like the vignettes on step exam are more like the UWorld vignettes, but I feel like the amount of information maybe they give you in the MBMEs is what's relevant to the actual exam. So kind of learning how to like the knowledge part of the question, if you learn how to like decipher what that diagnosis is, and then if you can get to the answer choice through an MBME, you'll be fine with more like fluff on the actual exam. I feel like it's more of like learning, okay, they're asking me this, I should know the answer to that, and then boom, you kind of, I guess, yeah. Like UWorld is more relevant to the actual exam and the length of the vignette. That's what I would say. Yeah.
And that's why we're using UWorld and Amboss, because
Oh yeah,
UWorld
or
is phenomenal and
yeah.
Amboss is great too. It just depends on what works for you, right? I know you're working with both. And that's awesome because that's what we tell our students with NBMEs. So like when we're grinding through the step process, preparing for that, what can you highlight about the challenges that we had versus what we overcame versus what something you specifically used for exam day that helped you really say, I'm being confident, I'm going in, I'm just really attacking the question.
So it's funny because you just mentioned Amboss. Like previous to you, I wasn't using Amboss. I don't even think I knew what Amboss was. And honestly, it's the best teaching tool, guys, especially for like the little things because you guys will say like, oh, that question's so hard, and it's like it's hard because they're teaching you like the little nuisance like details that you're not going to learn from just like watching a video. They're also teaching if you can like actually reason that little detail out, and be able to answer that question. So yeah, I wasn't using UWorld. UWorld is definitely an amazing tool to learn from, and so that was like kind of what kick started, I guess, once we started once we started tutoring me. And now I use it for my shelf exams, for I use it for step two, for everything. So it's very helpful. But what was the other question? Sorry, Todd.
Oh no, I would just say, and then so because the reason why I brought it up is because a lot of people use UWorld, use Amboss, and many of them are not aware that when you take the exam and you come out of it, right? Usually, the first question I always ask my students, well, from and Amboss, typically, if you can compare the questions that you've seen on the actual step, which ones do you think compared to which Q bank, right? So you told me back then it was more Amboss, a little UWorld,
Yeah.
NBMEs, as you mentioned earlier, are just shorter questions, like 2-3 liners. And a lot of students don't know that. And it's shocking to me that their schools or their admin or their colleagues don't tell them this, right? They just have to hopefully hear it from us, or they walk in assuming the test looks like an NBME. It looks nothing like it, right? That's
Yeah.
why I'm happy when you're like, hey, doc, it's just straight like Amboss with a little UWorld, similar
Yeah.
lengths, similar structures, right? And then on exam day, what did you implement that we worked together during our sessions? And what did you use that really just got you to the next level to be confident to pass the test?
So Stavros will key on read the last like 3 lines first. And when you have a huge vignette with a bunch of fluff, that couldn't be the best advice anybody will give you. Like that is the best advice you can give a person on test day, because the vignettes are very long, you're crunched on time, and you want to just know what do they want to know from this big vignette right off the bat before you even start reading the beginning. So reading the three like last sentences is huge. I also, when I started studying again with Saros, he would tell me like, can you knock any of these answers out? So kind of that way, that mentality approaching a question that you're kind of unsure of, if you can reason out all the answer choices and be like, okay, I can eliminate, like process of elimination, these answer choices, that'll help you a lot on test day too, because a lot of times you can eliminate at least down to 2. So then you're at least at a 50-50. Also on test day, if you don't know something, flag it and move. You don't want to mess your flow up. So you want to just keep going. Especially like biostats and like I'm terrible at biostats and epi and all that stuff. So when I see one of those, I just click and go. I know it sounds terrible, but they're holding you up on that time, and I think that's kind of like the point of those questions, anyways, is to kind of suck the time out of you so you don't get to the other ones. So yeah, those are kind of like the biggest things I used. Take breaks after every block is another huge one. A lot of people are like, oh, you should go through like 3 blocks and like not get up. It's like, no, take at least a 5-minute break. Even if you don't have to use the bathroom, at least get up off the seat, walk a little bit, move your legs, and then come back. Those are like the big 3 or big 4 things that I would like highly implement on test day. I think a lot of caffeine too. But yeah,
And
so
guys, and
yeah,
guys, by the way, Sergio, Dr. Sergio, for those who jumped in later, he's from SGU. He passed the step 1 with us. He took it October 22nd. He just took a step 2 CK. He's in rotation. So whatever he did for step 1, and he had his rotations, by the way. That's why I have
yeah,
him on board today, because he's going to talk to you about the rotations and VMEs, comp shelves. That's the whole point. He used it for step 1. He used it all throughout his shelves, and then he just took step 2, right? So that's why I'm happy he came on board with his busy schedule for all of us to listen to what he had to say, and also to learn from him and ask questions, right? So, okay, so you passed step 1. Congrats, awesome. And then you went through rotations, right? You've been doing the shelves, right? So how'd
yeah.
that go with shelves?
So it's big. It's a big point to make that step 1 is not just a pass fail exam. Like you really need to understand that this is like the base for everything that's to come. Even shelf, step 2, probably even step 3. Um, so you need it for even your rotations, right? And rotations can be very challenging because you don't really have that much time to study anymore. So if you don't have that knowledge there from step 1, you're gonna kind of be lacking in everything, shelf exams and step 2. So learning the big 3, like Savros explains to you guys, is very important. So for my rotations, I basically would do um, for my rotations, I will answer that question in a second, Anna. Yeah, for my rotations, I basically did like all like amboss for the actual like shelf exam, and then once it got closer to like the test, I would do all of UWorld or some of UWorld, and then by the time you're done with all your rotations and you've taken all your shelf exams, you're pretty ready to start, step 2 studying. Like you're not gonna feel that lack of knowledge. Um, like you would, I guess, when you're prepping for step 1 is a little different because it's more like little details. But once you get to step 2, you've gone through so many shelf exams, you've gone through so many questions. And again, if you have that foundation from step one, which I feel like thanks to Stavros I had, it's gonna carry you so much further in step two studying and shelf studying. And then
Happy
as
to hear
for
that.
the 120 that you were asking, I did that, I think, what was it, Doc, like 2 or 3 days before the exam?
So yeah, so Dr. Sergio and I, we created a certain schedule that we're going to do with all of you too. That typically the 120 you take about 5 days before, plus or minus 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, a few days prior. So we did NBMEs, right? And then we decided to do the 120 about 2, 3 days before. So I mean, how did you feel when you took the 120? How did you feel taking it? And then was it a good representation of the actual exam? Many students have those kind of questions. Does it look similar? You know?
Yeah, I actually feel that the free 120 is more representative because the stems are longer. Like they're actually like the length of the actual stems you'll see on the real exam. And I felt like it was more representative in that way. And also the questions aren't like as tricky. Like they have a little bit more stuff in the fluff that helps you kind of pinpoint a diagnosis. Or in step two's case, like a treatment or next step or whatever. And they're very good in like that part of the, I guess, test taking style. So it lets you kind of know if you're ready or not because it's the most I feel similar to the actual exam. That's what I thought.
That's
Yeah.
and that's good. I mean, then the 120, I'll provide the link in the training hub. It's on the USMLE. I mean, it's available. I'll put it on the hub for you guys. But the 120 is solid. Why we take a couple days before? That's just because you want to keep it to the end. You don't want to take it now, especially if you're not ready for it, right? And
Yeah,
that's why
I'll
we
do that
decided to do it
now.
later. You know, so now you did step one with us. You went through the rotations. Just quick touch on this. How did you balance? Because I know a lot of students ask this question to me all the time, and that's why I want you to answer it. See what you did. How did you balance prepping for step two and as well as prepping for the shelves while you were in rotations? Because step one, it's kind of easy. You're home disciplined all day, dedicated if we have the time.
Yeah.
Now, like step two, you got to balance everything. How did you handle that? Which is a big challenge for many.
I think the most challenging one was definitely surgery. We were working like, man, it was like 70 to 80 hours a week. And honestly, like your best friend is your downtime during the day. Like I know you guys are gonna be exhausted and all that stuff, but you have to find some sort of motivation. This goes for step one too. No one's gonna want it more than you. So no one's gonna be there pushing you or telling you, you gotta study, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. So any little downtime, just remind yourself like, man, okay, I have this downtime, especially if you feel good. Like, let me use it to my advantage, like no extra studying is ever gonna hurt. So when I was in rotations, like let's say between cases, there was nothing going on, I would pull my computer out and maybe do like, 5 questions. Even 5 questions would get you, so much more done than just sitting there and like scrolling through Instagram or something. So I know it's hard, but yeah, if you find those little downtimes, those were like the keys, and then I would use the weekends to my advantage. Now, granted, like, take time off and kind of air your brain a little bit, but I would use like at least the mornings to crunch in like 40, 80 questions, and that way you don't have to worry about doing so many during the week, if that
Yeah.
makes sense when you're more busy.
I mean, I bring this up, guys, because you might think it's not relevant, but how about the doctors out here watching now, participating or watching later who are part-time, full-time parents or in rotations, maybe having a side job? It's the same thing, right? Whether you're studying for step two, step one, it's a board exam. You're obligated to study, but you're also preoccupied with your other responsibilities. So looking back at it, step one is a little easier because if you have the time dedicated, you're just home studying. He's just challenging with the day-to-day structure of staying disciplined. Step two, you got to get in the car, drive to rotations, right? And
Yeah.
then come home and eat, sleep, self-care, hang out with husband, wife, spouse, fiance, whatever, and also study. So you see, there's always a challenge in every step you're taking. And this is living proof how he took step one. He went through all the rotations, all the shelves, 5 side every time. Now step two is done. And it's like, now we're going to be prepping for the match in a few months, right, Serge? Right, Sergio? So
Yeah.
it's exciting. I'm excited for you. I mean, that's why I wanted to bring you on board. Plus,
No,
this
and thank
guy,
you for
ladies and
having me.
gentlemen, he's engaged getting married in October. So congrats to you, not only studying for step one, step two, but then scheduling this wedding of yours in October. So congrats. We wish
Thank
you the
you.
best on that.
Thank you.
Um, guys, any questions you have, please ask away. My question, Tarisai says, about the exam day, are we allowed to bring snacks? What do you recommend to
Oh
eat
yeah.
in the morning?
Yeah, so exam day it's basically I think step one is 8 or 7 blocks, and then you get like 45 minutes of break time. So the reason I tell you use a break between each like block is because you want to have the time to also like kind of drink something and eat something really quick. So I brought like little like snacks and then like a sandwich, but honestly like it's so fast you probably won't even eat a lot. So I would always bring like little like protein bars or fruit or like I said, a sandwich, but mainly like I did a lot of energy drinks. And well, Stavros will also tell you this, but once you get closer to like getting ready for the exam, you want to kind of simulate the exam on your everyday basis. So you want to be doing like, at least 5 blocks a day. So you're going into this exam kind of with the stamina already of at least you can get through 5 blocks easy. So yeah, it's thank you. Thank you, Reddy. Yeah, so you can at least get through like the exam a little bit more easy, right? So yeah, it helped a lot.
I mean, I'll tell you guys, and I'm telling you all this because I care. We're all a team here. Oh, is it true that you can do the tutorial at home? Tarisai asks.
Yeah, I think that the is it the 120 or the actual tutorial video that you are asking about?
Um,
The tutorial video, I think you can find it. I think you
yeah,
sent.
the tutorial video. I'll put it in the training hub. It's going to be part of the 120. I think there's the tutorial there. It's 15. It's a 10-minute. It's a 15-minute, 10-minute video. Actually, 15. And what did we tell you, Dr. Sergio? What'd you do for the tutorial video on the day of the exam?
I skipped it on the day of the exam. Yeah,
You watched it in advance, right? So you watched it in
yeah, that's
advance,
in it.
like
Yeah.
skip through. But why'd you skip it? What's the advantage of skipping?
Well, you don't want to sit there for 15 minutes watching this thing, right? You're about to take an 8-hour exam. Your time is your best friend in that moment. So yeah, you don't want to sit there and watch like 15 minutes and it's gonna disrupt your flow. And yeah, it's anything that day is like your brain is like your best friend. You want to preserve it at all costs.
And that's
So
why, and that's what we do is, and I worked with Dr. Sergio on this. I'll tell you guys too. You watch the video in advance once or twice, and then that opportunity, that time frame that is allowed, allocated to watch the tutorial, you'll skip through it, and then that time is part of your break because you have 1 hour to do the whole
yeah,
break, but 15 minutes is given to the tutorial because as soon as you press start when you start the exam, it just counts down, right? It stops at 0. It doesn't stop. It doesn't pause. So that's why what we did with Dr. Sergio is, hey, listen, watch the video in advance, learn, figure, get acclimated to that. When you sit down and you press start, watch the tutorial, fast, 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 skip every step, get to the end. And that time, that extra 14 minutes instead of 15, that extra minute that you navigated through will be provided onto your actual break time. So then you have, 40, literally you have like 55, 58, 59 minutes instead of 45 minutes. So I'll give you guys a tutorial link too. So you go watch that when the time comes and then you get acclimated. So then you have the full advantage of all that time spent. Like Dr. Serge said, right? You need the breaks, which is good. Awesome.
yeah.
Anthony asks, go ahead, Dr. Sergio.
No, I was gonna say yeah, that'll help a lot. Break time is huge.
And then what do we do about the equation sheet? Remember we talked about that. Anthony's asking about it. Reddy's jumping in. Did you do that on exam day? If you did, how'd you handle it? How'd you
No,
create it?
so honestly, biostats and epi are like the two things that I just never like. Even for step two or step one, I could never get down. So I honestly disregarded it. I'm not giving you this advice. Don't do what I did, but I disregarded it because it was something that it was very time consuming for me and I just couldn't get the questions right. So I focused my attention to my other weaknesses. So
But
that
before we continue to jump on that note, it's true. I'll tell you why, and love to have feedback on this. biostats and epi. Everybody that I talk to for the past 10 years, they always say, that's my worst. That's why I failed. No, that isn't why you failed. That's part of why maybe you didn't pass, because that's on your memory of not getting those questions right. But like I talk to Dr. Sergio about, and I tell you guys on a daily basis, you never want to ignore it, but you want to focus more on attention on what you have, we can control. Everything else we do, right? So I'm honest with you. I don't like biostats and epi. So I know I'm not going to do well. But if I go ahead and focus my farm, my biochem, my immuno, my micro, control what I know, my cardio, then you know what? I'll get whatever I get on the exam, 50-50. I'll get it right, I'll get it wrong. I don't know. I'll do my best. And that's why he did well. See, it's living proof. He passed. Not to say to ignore epi, but it's like, well, that's my weakness. I can't work so much emphasis on that. I need to make emphasis and I need to work on the other stuff. That's all it is. So it does work. I'm just happy it worked, That's good. I don't
Yeah, and
like it.
take it I would say like let's say from every block you might have like only two, maybe three like biostats questions. And let's say you guess on it right on one of them at least, then it's not so bad when you can like destroy the rest of the block, right? So
Sure.
gives you kind
Sure.
of that safety net to know everything else.
Did
That's better.
you did you take the time at the beginning and write down any equations on, like, we call it dump sheet, like maybe change the name, dump sheet on a sheet, like transition, like your brain dump it? Did you do anything like that on step one and step two?
No, I didn't do it. I know like a lot of my friends did, but I didn't do it. I just kind of, like you said, skip tutorial and just go. I was like just wanting to focus and get in and go. There's just so much to like know that I wouldn't know what to kind of write on the paper if I wanted
Yeah.
to, unless it was equations. But at the same time, on my step two, which is more fresh, obviously, equation wise, I only got like three and they were pretty like simple. Like I had like a sensitivity one where you're just they have the diagram already like done for you, like the four blocks, and you just do,
Yeah.
you don't even have to get the answer. They have like the whole equation for you. So
That's
that was
good.
fair. Yeah, and then like the other biostat stuff you're gonna get is like like the confounding and like the selective bias or whatever, like those things. So, um, yeah, if you can kind of reason those, then you might be well off too.
Good.
Yeah.
Sergio, was there a lot of anatomy? That's a question from Tarisai. Anatomy is always a question that many doctors have. Biostats anatomy biostats. How good or how bad
Anatomy?
was
No,
anatomy on yours? Eh?
no. I feel like there was like no anatomy. Yeah, no. And it's funny because in family medicine you do see a lot of anatomy because I mean once you guys get to the rotation for the shelf exam, because of all like the protocols for like the MSK injuries. But even in the actual exam, I probably had like one question that was like more anatomy driven than anything. So yeah, no anatomy really.
Sergio, what did you use? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is an example to everyone. You can't you can't go into the exam thinking, it's going to be a lot of this versus that. It's random, right? we just
Yeah.
we just do our very best to really be strong in everything, but we have our strengths and weaknesses. What did you use for step one to strengthen your foundation as far as resources, and then if was it the same or different for step two?
So for step one, once I started with you guys, because before I wasn't even, I felt like I wasn't really even studying. But before I started with you, Dr. Stavros, I would just kind of keep going, right? You're like, 56, maybe I have to do more questions, and then you just keep this like cycle of like, you're never like actually honing down the weaknesses. So when we started, you suggested, once you do like a block of 40, right? Let's say you had five cardio and you missed all five. Well, you're clearly weak on that five of cardio. So what I would do after that is, for step one, I would either watch like a video on, the specific cardio stuff that I was weak on, or I would go on to Amboss and do like a block of just cardio, like 40 questions, just cardio, and then really get that down. And I would do that maybe for like a day or two until I had seen enough cardio to kind of be like, okay, this is like, getting a little easier for me, then I'm gonna keep moving on with, another subject or my mixed questions.
Cool.
So
And then going back, I see a question from Anna. We kind of touched up on it, but I want to highlight it again. How many weeks before your exam did you start doing 5 exams? I mean, 5 blocks a day. I know you touched up on it, but if
yeah.
when did you start? And then did you do that for step two? And then if it was the case, was it the same time frame? Because whatever you guys do for step one, you should do for step two as well. If not better, right? More. It's more material.
Yeah, it's more. But yeah, you used to tell me this saying, I think it was like you can't start riding a bicycle without like the training wheels or something like that. Some
One of my
silly.
main examples, yeah.
But yeah, you want to start, like what you're kind of like okay with, and then gradually increase, right? So like I think I started for step two with like 2 blocks a day, so only 80 questions. And I slowly just kept adding like, 20 more a day, and then 40 more a day. And then next thing you know, you're about like 3 weeks out of the exam and you're already at like 5 blocks, right? So it's just a gradual increase, but you want to make the increase a little quick, it like in a sense that you have enough time to be hitting 5 blocks consistently for a good period of time before the exam. You don't want to get to like 5 blocks like 3 days before the exam, because then you're only doing 5 blocks 3 days before the exam. You're not really building on anything. So I
I
think for
mean,
step two, I was at 5 blocks. I don't know, maybe like 3 weeks before. Yeah,
step
like
two is a different beast when we get to that level, guys. Step two is pretty, and Anthony just jumping on it. Step two is easier in some ways, but more
yeah.
challenging because, and Sergio can talk about this, but step one is so important to build the foundation, as you mentioned before, because those who don't have that strong foundation, when you get to step two, you have to kind of pick, got a seesaw back and forth, step one, step two training, versus if you have a solid foundation, then you go in. So, but take it away, Doc. You're here for this reason. So, Anthony asked, did you find that step two was easier to prepare for in the sense that it was hands on versus just endless questions and book study?
It's easier and hard at the same time. Harder because there's more information, but luckily you have, I mean, I don't know how your school does it, but my school you have to take a shelf before after every rotation, sorry. So that shelf exam is 110 questions for that specific rotation. So those shelf exams really prepare you for step two without you even noticing it, right? So my dedicated went by very smooth compared to step one because I took those shelf exams very serious. Like I was trying to honor every single one, and not because I'm like gunning, the honor or anything, but because I knew that that would transition into my step two studying. So take them very, very seriously if you guys do have them. If you don't, my biggest suggestion is that you do it yourself, like go through the rotation and then do the whole, like UWorld or AMBOSS, like within that rotation, right? So for internal medicine, it's for my school, it was 12 weeks. I basically did the first 6 weeks, I did all of AMBOSS like by system based. So I did like cardio, I did pulm, I did all that stuff, and then I finished AMBOSS within 6 weeks of that internal medicine rotation. And then the last six, I did UWorld mixed. So by the time my shelf came, it felt like a breeze. And everyone is like all stressed about the internal medicine shelf and all this, but it goes back to that base, right? So I had a really strong base because of Stavros for step one. And that really transitions into your step two because you don't have the questions don't ask you really for diagnosis anymore. So you're supposed to know that the question is asking you about like Parkinson's, but you want to know what you're gonna give them. So then it becomes like, okay, if I don't even know that this person has Parkinson's, I don't even know what the treatment is. So if you don't have that base, you have to really kind of um, you have to really build it back up. And that's why it's important for you guys that are in, step one prep to really have it solidified now. I know that was a long-winded answer, but yeah.
There,
It was
Sergio,
easier
there, everyone
and
used to. What is it? What is it?
no, I was saying it was easier in a sense, but you got to put in the work just like anything else, right?
I was gonna say everyone's used to the long-winded answers because that's what I always give. I like give the long version of a short answer of yes or no because I give you the
Yeah.
story. Dr. Reddy asks, how did you keep yourself, how did you stay focused during your dedicated prep? And she deals with focused issues even in timed exam mode. This is huge, by the way, because if you're dedicated, you're home all day studying, which is a blessing, but then a curse because you have so much time on your hands, right? And everyone
Yeah.
struggles with this at some point. So please, Doc, take it away. Any valuable advice would be great because I mean it helped you. You passed step one, step two. We're getting the results, but I know you killed it. So take it away, man. What'd you do for you to do this?
So number one thing, use Stavros as your like backbone, okay? Like use it as like a I have to prove him that I'm, putting the work because he's putting in some work, right? So that's motivation number one. Number two,
Thank
I would say like, use yourself. Like no one wants it more than you, right? No one's gonna push you, no one's gonna wake you up. Find the time that works for you. Like luckily for step one, if you're not, in school or doing rotations, if you're like a late night person studier, then focus your time on like doing the most you can within that period. But for me, I honestly like my biggest motivation was that I just wanted to get into rotations. Like it had been, I think, 6 months before I contacted Stavros. So at this point, I was like, I gotta like, I had this like huge like pressure on my back of like just get it over with, get into rotations, learn as much as you can, and that was like my biggest motivation. So every morning that I didn't want to study, and I would wake up and be like, oh man, I don't want to study today. I'd be like, dude, that's one day less. Like that's one day that you're postponing your rotations is what my mentality was every morning. It's like I don't want to study today. Okay, then you're not gonna be in the rotation for another day, and then another day, and then another day. So then when that builds up, you're like, crap, it's been, I don't know, a year and you're not in your rotations yet, right? So that was a huge motivation. Just that.
Doc, walk. I'm sorry, please go ahead. Please go ahead. No,
No,
please
no,
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. I was just saying like that pressure and yeah, it helps push you.
Well, let me ask you, for those who jumped in a little later, can you provide us a quick timeline of your step one shelves and step two? Because I mean, people need to see that it's some people are dedicated because they're already graduated, but you're in school, right? So walk us through a
Yeah.
quick timeline of your step one comp shelf, step two.
So I did so yeah, so basically before working with you, I did like 6 months of dedicated. I wasn't really doing like, for example, like my dedicated was like 80 questions a day and then watching a couple of videos on like boards and beyond. Yeah, boards and beyond. That was my dedicated previous to Stavros. And yeah, it wasn't a lot. Like 80 questions is not that much when you look at how many questions is in the actual exam, right? And so I wasn't learning that much. So then once I started working with Stavros, we're, slowly bumped that up. We started doing more like content review because he clearly saw, I had a weakness in my basis. And at the beginning, I was like, oh man, he's gonna make me go through all this again. Like, I was like, kind of knocked you down a little bit, but at the same time, it was like, all right, I just, I was like, I gotta do this, right? So I pushed myself and I went through like all of online med ed. I don't even know what was in like a month, I think. I just grinded out like if I was back in school, like 8 hour days of just content and like a little bit of questions here and there. And basically what I did was once I would finish like a part of online med ed, I would start those questions on Amboss. So that's kind of like the way I did it throughout step one, after Stavros, and then I would use Amboss to solidify whatever I had learned through online med ed videos, and then using like the test taking skills. The key, what was it? The key finding for Amboss with like the key tip. Those are huge, and I know a lot of people are like, oh man, I don't want to do that. It's giving me the, it's not giving you the answer. It's literally pointing to the most important part of the question so that it triggers your brain to think that way when you don't have it. So huge thing. I even use that for step two. So and all my shelves. And I don't care what anybody says, those hints are magic.
I
Um
mean, that's insane. I mean, I'm happy you said that. Now, timeline wise, and looking back at it, I know you know for a long time because that was 2022, right? To
yeah, 20
2022. So
October 20.
2022, you took October 2022 was step one.
Yeah.
Um, And then, wow, and then a whole year goes by in rotations, right? All your cores, and we work together side by side through that. And then you just took step two recently. So
Yeah.
you see, you guys have to stay on. How'd you do all that, Doc? How did you do stay focused for step one rotations and step two? I know you said motivation, but man, it's just you didn't stop grinding nonstop.
No, I think if you stop, it's worse. Like you, so basically, I took my, so I studied with you for about like 3 months, but I had like a little thing happen in life, so I had to step away for like a couple of weeks and then come back. Um, but after that, it was like maybe like 2 months of just dedicated studying, and then past step one, I wasn't able to start rotations till January, so there was like a little gap between my test and rotations. But then I did my rotations from January to December, and then I started studying for step two in January, my dedicated, and my dedicated for step two was about 5 weeks. Um, but essentially, it was a little different than step one because, I didn't do like the whole online med ed thing or anything like that. I just kind of built on test taking and questions at this point because of what I told you guys about every single shelf exam, right? So you're slowly prepping for step two, and you want to make sure you're doing well in those exams because it's going to definitely transfer over.
Well, I mean, just think of it this way. I'm happy you just mentioned that because, especially guys, this is where you're pushing, right? This is the motivation, Dr. Vicky, we're talking about. The work that you did, the work that I want you all to do, allowed you to do step two in 5 weeks. Are you kidding me? The average person takes 3 or 4 months, if not more, because they're not keeping up with their rotations, they're not keeping up with their internal medicine and cores, and they start studying for step two after 1 year of rotations. Well, I know you and I was pushing you. We were working together. You're like, yeah, I got to do it. And I told you, if you do it from now, like I'm telling you all to do, it's living proof that less than 6 weeks, less than 2 months, this guy went in and took step two. And he was crushing NBMEs at what? What was your highest score on NBMEs for step two, by the way?
The highest was 251. Yeah.
Man, you're gonna get a high on step two. So I'm happy for that. Dr. Vicky comes in. What did you do in the last 1 month before your exam, before your step one? Dr.
Uh,
Sergio from Be Ready.
My last month for step one, I was probably grinding out like 5 blocks at that point, and I think we were doing what like an NBME a week almost, or two NBMEs a week. Um, yeah, at that point, it's more of like you should have your content down, and it's more like questions at that point, right? Because there's two parts to that exam: is the content part, and then you gotta be able to apply that concept to the questions. So a lot of people they're like so worried about getting all this content into their head. You ask them a simple question, they're like freeze. So you have to know how to kind of apply all that content you learned into a question setting so you don't get tripped up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna ask you this question because I know a lot of people struggle with this. When you're at home studying, when you're on the NBMEs are 200 questions. Okay, fair.
Yeah.
50 questions, now 40. Step one are 7 blocks. Step two is 8 blocks. So it's like running a marathon and then saying when you're done, hey guys, let's run 5 more miles. You're not going to make it, right? Because it's 40 extra questions. It sounds like not that many, but it's a whole different block. What do you do to help you through the stamina and endurance? Because I get questions every day when people ask me, after 3 blocks, I drop. After 2.5 blocks, I can't concentrate. My score dips, right? What did you do if that? I mean, I know it happens to everyone. So I'm
Yeah.
asking you, what did you do specifically that can help resonate with doctors here and those watching the recording later of how to prevent or how to avoid burning out and how to perfect your stamina endurance to get it done?
So if that happened or when that happened to me, I would kind of scale it back for a little time, like not like drastically, right? Like let's say you're doing, I don't know, 3 blocks, right? And that last part of that third block, you're just like, man, my brain is just gone by the middle of this third block. Then I would scale it to maybe doing 2 blocks and a 20 right after the second block, right? Obviously with your little breaks in between, but scale it back. And then once you're like, okay, I can crush these 20 like easy now. Then you add the next 20 and then you crush those 20 and then you're going to add another 20. You don't have to add like a whole 40 right away because sometimes it's not realistic, right? Especially when you're like 4 blocks in you're not gonna just add another fifth block. I did it in increments of 20, and it was something that Stavros suggested because I told him, like, my stamina's not there. What do I do? And he's like, maybe try adding by 20 instead of 40. So that's kind of what I did. But if I was going too quick and I was burning out at the end, I would just scale it back a little bit. Um, and then
Cool.
the review part is also, um, I don't know if you want me to touch up on that, but like the part that was the hardest for me, like to burning out wise, was reviewing, 5 bucks, because that was like, what do I do? Um, so the review at that point, you should be focusing on the incorrects mainly. I would still read the corrects, but it would be more of like a skimming through, um like the explanation, versus if you got it wrong, then obviously you want to like dedicate a lot more time to the incorrect. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest advice.
I mean, I'm happy you brought that up because I myself never liked reviewing. And I know a lot of students just don't like it. Either they're, I mean, I get it. I get tired. I know you were getting tired. We all get tired. We put the hard work into 5 blocks, but now you have to assess yourself. And I know it's challenging, but he did it. We can do it. We will do it. And as long as you take time to assess why you're getting the questions wrong, then you can fix it, right? I mean, what's the point of hitting 100 balls in a golf course or swinging a bat and then not really assessing your swing and expecting overnight to get better? You can, especially step two. So that's why I'm happy, man, you jumped on board, Doc, because I know we took your time, but this is not just step one. We were actually very lucky to have him jump on because he step one, which then a year goes by, comp exams, shelf exams, step two, and love to have you on board once you get that score to kind of give us a little taste of what you scored. And then, because he's going to be applying for the match this year, we're going to be working together to get you up and running for the mock exams and all, so the mock interviews. And that's why I love that you came on so we could ask questions because, hey, this is your colleague, guys, who was in there, and now he's
Yeah,
smiling
it's my
more
pleasure.
than before because he's happy,
It's my pleasure to
So what
help out in any way I
I
can.
oh, I appreciate you, man. What's your schedule now? What are you doing now for the rest of the year?
I start emergency medicine on Monday.
And what do you
So
want to pursue in? What do you want to pursue?
I'm
Specialty.
between emergency medicine and internal med, but yeah, I guess we have to see because I haven't really done like a full emergency medicine rotation. So that'll be nice. And this is at a level one trauma center, so it'll be like the full exposure.
Wow,
Yeah.
awesome.
It'll be fun.
And why I bring that up, and please, guys, any other questions, ask Dr. Sergio, is because when you are studying for step one, it is pass or fail. And the pass or fail, you're on the same level as anybody else in the country, if not the world. A P is a P. There's no score. So if you have a pass, you need to score very high on step two, CK, to then give you that extra edge for emergency medicine. So way back when I met Dr. Sergio, my goal is I will have you score the highest possible for step two. So then whatever you choose, whatever you desire, you make that decision versus a score will decide your future. So that's how we work, right? And that's why he wanted ER or possibly internal medicine and specialize maybe cardio or some specialty of
Yeah.
a fellow. But my rule of thumb is I'm going to get you high. I'm going to get you this high of a score so you can then say, I can go with ER. I can go maybe with surge. I can go maybe with anesthesia versus, I scored very low score. Or and then I have to decide a specialty is decided for me because of a score, right? So that's why I get very excited when I work with doctors and they score very high because then typically the score decides their future, and that's not fair. It's not, but we crack the code, right? We do our very best to allow him to do what he wants to do. So we're excited for you, Doc.
Thank you,
Any
Doc.
last words? Wow, my pleasure, man. Any last words of wisdom? Oh, thank you so much, Anthony. We want to pursue EM. So see, Anthony wants to go EM versus anesthesia, right? That's awesome. Dr. Reddy, all the best for your future endeavors. Dr. Sergio, keep in touch with us. He will definitely.
Thank you,
Any
Eddie.
last words, Dr. Sergio, for people watching this video now, later, live, recorded? Any words of wisdom from you to whoever's watching about step one, the journey, comp exams, rotations, everything, the whole USMLE journey?
Yeah, I know,
Words of
I
wisdom.
know that like I know that step studying is like, a hassle, and you guys are gonna lose motivation. That's normal. You know, find little things that you can do during the day that'll help you kind of motivate yourself, or you know, if it's taking a walk, if it's going to the gym, whatever it is, do those things, even if you think it's gonna like corrupt your study time, because you need to be healthy mentally to be able to beat this exam. So anything that will help you kind of keep going, even though you think like, oh, it's gonna take time from like my review, whatever, it doesn't matter. That's more important, because it'll help you focus when you get back to reviewing. So you're not wasting time just sitting here like dragging out your review or dragging out your questions and kind of going through motions. So motivation is very important, and the only person that can motivate you is yourself, because no one else is going to push you. And that goes for step one, shelf exams, step two, and then also like things like comparing yourself to your peers. Once you get into rotations is another huge thing that I see a lot of people like, you know, they're always comparing themselves to others. Don't do that. You're yourself, like, you know, go in there, kill it, do what you gotta do, and enjoy the whole process. You know, it's hard when you're prepping for step exams because it's so like time consuming and the stress is so high, but don't forget to enjoy like all the other things, right? Like look forward to the rotations that you have. So it keeps you kind of going, right? If you're gonna dread a rotation or you're gonna dread what's coming next, you're just gonna be like, why am I here? And then you're gonna lose purpose of why you even chose medicine. So yeah, just one day at a time. That's my biggest
Well, listen,
advice.
Doc, I mean, I appreciate you. We appreciate you. We thank you very much for taking time. Usually, you know, I always stay in touch with doctors and students that I work with and build a relationship, because it is a long journey. Step one, step two, residency, because we want all of you to get into the best possible rotation, a specialty, right? And not let the numbers dictate. You just want to have that power, right? So we thank you so much for jumping on, and we'll love to have you on board once you score very high, which either way you will, and then share any advice, because as we keep moving forward with our experiences, you're ahead of us, right? You're planning for the match, then all the interviews going on, so you'll be coming on board quite often. But we thank you very much for your time, Dr. Sergio. Have a wonderful day and relax, because then you start rotations again, right? So enjoy
Yeah,
life. I love the smile. Enjoy, be happy, because then you're going to be working a lot, right? So we
exactly.
thank you, Dr. Serge, man. I really appreciate it, buddy. Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for
Take
having
care.
me. Thank
Thank
you.
you. All right, guys. So we have a few minutes. I know I'm happy Dr. Sergio jumped on board, because he was able to really share with us not only step one, not only shelf exams, but then step two. It's not often you get this, because, you know, it's a whole year that has passed from his step one. Typically, we have step one students that pass, we bring them on board. Then we have people that pass in their shelves, and then step two. So you had a 3-for-1 today. That's why we went for most of the hour. But that being said, I want to share my screen with you, because I did promise you guys a little NBME touch. And again, we'll do more NBMEs. I will post more things in the training hub. And on Tuesday morning, we'll actually dedicate half hour, if not more, to NBMEs. But simple question here. Here is an NBME question that was provided from one of our students. And to show you and to prove to you, this is a type of questions you have on NBMEs. There it is. The question stem is very short. The answer is here in advance. I'm just going to go through it. A 37-year-old woman brought to the emergency department. You guys can see the screen, right? We're good? Yeah. After her husband found her unconscious. Her temp was 96.8, pulse 128, blood pressure 70/40. Low, right? So we have pulse is high, blood pressure is low. Physical exam, cool, pale extremities. So it's not warm, so it's not septic shock. It's not septic, right? We did shock the other day. So it's cool, pale extremities, jugular venous distension, faint peripheral pulses and crackles over the bottom of 2/3 of the lung fields. Heart sounds are normal. There are no murmurs. She withdraws to painful stimuli in all four extremities. The patient is most likely experiencing which of the following shock? This is a typical NBME question. Now, the answer's in front of you. Great. But want to show you briefly This is the length of these kind of questions. It was provided from one of our students. Obviously, the answer is cardiogenic. We chose hypovolemic because it can happen, right? We see a low blood pressure. But remember now, ideally, we have different shocks. In this case here, cardiogenic shock can occur in setting of acute MI. She's 37, brought to the ED, found unconscious. Okay. Check this out. Several severe valvular dysfunction, heart failure, heart block, or arrhythmias. Okay. There are no murmurs. Heart sounds are normal. Patient may experience cardiogenic pulmonary edema resulting in shortness of breath, which is the case here. Pulmonary artery catheterization typically demonstrate decreased cardiac index and so on. This actually is a pretty good explanation of why it's cardiogenic. But look at the other ones. We have anaphylactic, hypovolemic, neurogenic, and septic. You can clearly cut out septic because it's not warm. It's not warm, but it's cold. Anaphylactic, they have to give you something of like taking medication, bee sting, something of an intake of some medication, or like a bee sting, right? Something that's going to stimulate the anaphylactic shock. Neurogenic, we know it can't be. Why? Why isn't it neurogenic, guys? Put it in the chat box. Let me see the chat. I got to pull it up. Chat box. Yeah, I mean, that, and also we said in neurogenic, everything is down, but there's no levels here. And on top of that, yeah, heart rate's supposed to be down. You're right. This is pulse is high. Also, remember, has to have some injury. They have to give you some severing of the spinal cord, some brain trauma, something, because neuro is all down. Okay. So we were down to hypovolemic versus cardiogenic. Okay. In this case, hypovolemic, they have to give you something of like blood loss, right? A stab, a wound, accident, some sort of hemorrhaging, some volume loss, right? Diarrhea, like here, hypovolemia has to have a significant decrease, usually hemorrhage, dehydration, GI loss, right? That's why we have to be aware of the presentations. Typically, cardiogenic shock, these kind of shocks are easy in UWorld versus Amboss because they spoon feed you all these findings. This is NBME. This is very, very short, couple of lines, not too much. This pushes you to the next level of knowing so much of each condition, like Dr. Sergio stated earlier, learning and knowing the concept so well that if they give you bare minimum, like being in the hospital with your attending and he wants to pimp you, pimping is, that's what we use in the medical phrase, medical world, like just attacking you with questions to see if you know, like really attacking you. They want to see, do you know the information? Cardiogenic shock can occur in MI, acute, severe valvular dysfunction, severe heart failure, heart block, and arrhythmia. So when they're telling you cool, pale extremities, JVD, faint pulses, crackles over the bottom 2/3, there's your edema right there. There's your connection with lung. There's your connection with congestion. That's exactly how the NBMEs are. We'll do more. I'll post a couple examples in Training Hub for you to take a look at. These are from students that have shared things with me. So I'm just sharing it with you. But at the end of the day, when you get to the NBMEs, at that point, you know, and I know you've been doing well in your UWorld versus Amboss. You're not going to jump in the deep end to take this exam unless you're scoring 62, 65s on your QBank. Because if you're not scoring them when you have questions that are long, that are pretty detailed, very difficult to jump and do this and score very well. Because if you score not that well on these, you start getting upset, you get down, you get angry, you get pissed. So it's a step-by-step process. So ideally, you do UWorld versus Amboss, prefer before you go to the NBME. We do a couple of assessment blocks in your preferred QBank to feel that you have the timing and the stamina. And ideally, I'll provide you with some training, specifically NBMEs. I'm working on a video series now that's going to help you introduction to NBME, because I think that everyone needs it. Personally, it doesn't exist. People just have it randomly online, but I'm creating something specific for you guys and for the future students to help you navigate through NBMEs, to make it easier for you, more efficient and effective, and actually more doable, instead of just jumping in the deep end and swimming. Okay. So this is a prime example of what NBMEs look like: short lines, short phrases, and that's it. Okay. Let me see if I have another one quickly before we go. Give me a second, guys. I'm going to unshare my screen 1 second to pull one other one on, just to show you an example. Okay. Give me a second. I'm very happy Dr. Sergio jumped on. I'm happy you guys came because why not? I mean, take advantage of that. Here's one more quick example. Can you see my screen again? Yes. Okay. Here it is. I want you to think about it. I'm going to put this question in the training hub, and I want you guys to answer it in the training hub, and I'll provide the answer a little later today. So I'll provide this question in the training hub. I want you to take a look at it, put your answers in, chat away, and then I'll provide the answer later in the day. So in this case, we have the most likely cause of these findings is a deficiency, which of the following: 16-year-old girl, cystic fibrosis, brought to the physician because of a 3-week history of generalized weakness, numbness, tingling of her arms, legs, difficulty walking. She has not adhered to her medication regimen during the past 6 months. She appears alert and oriented. Vitals are good. Physical exam, bilateral weakness and decreased deep tendon reflexes in the upper and lower extremities. Ataxic gait. What is the deficiency? So I'll put this in the training hub. Take a look at it. Answer the question there. Later in the day, I will provide the answers with explanation to every answer choice. Okay. I'll start doing that. Combination of NBMEs for now. Eventually, some questions in AMBOSS, so it could get you motivated, it could get you working together, nonstop 24/7, right? That's what I'm here for. So this is exactly the questions are on the NBME. And then once you pass and do well, you get my thumb of approval, my thumbs up. Then you got to revert back to the UWorld AMBOSS style to pass the test. Makes sense? This is just concepts. This is more testing your knowledge. It's not an actual representation of the exam. This is just the content is representation. Okay. Let's see the chat away. Let's see the chat box. I won't give you guys the answers. So let's see what the answers are. I'm not going to give it to you. All right. Yeah. We'll see later. I'll put it in the chat. I'll put it in the training hub. Little tease for you guys till later. Right. So have a wonderful day ahead. This afternoon, we're doing neurology. Again, if you're on point with neurology, little points of interest are brain cancers that we talked about way back when. Leverage the exam to your advantage. Don't just read to read, right? Leverage the exam to your advantage. All right. So I love the interaction. You will get the answer choice in the training hub with all the explanations of all the answer choices within that particular slide. I will also provide the cardiogenic shock one in there as well, so you guys can review. And hey, I think I might just provide one every day, every other day on the training hub. You got to go on, check it out yourselves. All right. Because this is a community. I want you guys all to participate and push each other to move forward and be that Dr. Sergio, where you pass your step 1, you take everything we learn, you use it for your rotations if you are in rotations or will be, and then destroy your shelves to then build that foundation for step 2, and then take your step 2 in less than 6 weeks. So you can move on and practice the medicine that you desire in residency. All right. Guys, always a pleasure. I thank you. Keep going, keep pushing. Happy Thursday. Happy leap year 229. You'll see this 4 years from now. Happens once every 4 years. So guys, I appreciate you, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.